it has often been my lot, as companion and biographer of my friend Sherlock Holmes, to observe how trifling circumstances, utterly unremarkable to my own eyes, was sufficient for him to trace a chain of reasoning which led him unerringly to startling conclusions. The story I now set down, which I entitled The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb, began in the most ordinary of ways, in our modest lodgings at Baker Street. I confess, I never dreamed that so singular and perilous a case would unfurl from a simple morning visit. Holmes and I had been sharing our breakfast, he immersed in one of his chemical experiments, cum LIT. While I perused the newspaper, the atmosphere in our sitting room was that unique blend of domestic tranquility and impending adventure which seemed to cling to 221B Baker Street. Holmes, my dear fellow, you appear to be boiling acids perilously close to my toast.
The toast, Watson, has no bearing upon the purity of the precipitate, though I grant it may acquire an aroma not generally associated with the breakfast table.
I begin to suspect you intend to poison me one day in the name of science.
Poison? Nonsense! The merest whiff of hydrochloric vapor will do no worse than clear the sinuses. But see here, Watson, observe how the liquid darkens, a most instructive reaction.
Before I could muster further protest, a hurried knock sounded upon the door. Then, upon the door, followed by the sharp creak of Mrs. Hudson's step ascending.
A gentleman to see you, Mr. Holmes. Looks in a dreadful state, poor soul, pale as paper, and his hand all swathed in bandages.
The next moment, a young man of about 27 entered. His face was ghastly white, drawn as though by recent agony, and he clutched his right hand, heavily bound with cloths that bore dark stains. Good heavens, sir, you are injured. Pray be seated. Holmes, the man requires immediate care.
By all means, Watson, take charge of the medical aspect. For my part, I shall observe.
I led the gentleman to an armchair by the fire. Carefully unwrapping the bandages, I discovered that the thumb of his right hand had been severed as cleanly as though by a sharp instrument. The wound was raw and fresh, though not dangerously bleeding. The thumb has been cut off at the joint, a clean incision, no tearing. This was not an accident with machinery. It was done deliberately by some instrument wielded with force and precision.
Just so. Pray proceed, Watson.
I cleansed and bound the wound afresh while the young man sat trembling, his eyes darting from my face to Holmes's keen gaze. Go on. There. That should suffice for the present, though you will require rest. Now, sir, perhaps you can tell us what occurred.
Yes, indeed. You have come to consult me, I presume. Your appearance speaks of recent peril, and your condition is most peculiar.
My name is Victor Hatherley. I am a hydraulic engineer. I live alone at lodgings in Victoria Street. I have endured a most extraordinary adventure, Mr. Prudential, Mr. Cavett, Holmes, and am sorely perplexed as to what course I should take.
Pray recount the matter from the beginning, Mr. Hatherley. Spare no detail, however trivial it may appear to you.
The young engineer drew a long breath, his pallid face set with determination, and began his tale.
It is now 2 years since I completed my training as an engineer. My special interest is in hydraulic presses and machines involving high pressure. Unfortunately, though I have skill, I lack capital. Commissions have been few, and I have often been in want of employment.
That is a grievous plight, sir. Many young professionals suffer thus.
2 nights ago, as I sat in my lodgings, a stranger called upon me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a heavy moustache and dark, piercing eyes. He introduced himself as Colonel Lysander Stark, a gentleman of German extraction.
Colonel Lysander Stark, a name that suggests military pretension. Describe him further.
He spoke with a slight accent, yet fluently enough. He told me he had need of a hydraulic engineer to repair a machine of great value. The task, he said, must be undertaken with secrecy, for the apparatus was employed in connection with an industrial process he desired to keep private.
And you consented.
I confess I was tempted by the sum he offered. 50 guineas for a night's work. Such a fee was beyond my usual earnings, and though I felt some uneasiness at his insistence upon secrecy, I agreed to accompany him.
And did he name the location of this machine?
He told me only that it lay in the countryside, some miles from Reading. He arrived at my lodgings last night in a brougham carriage, and bade me enter. From thence we drove through the darkness for near an hour.
As the young man spoke, Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled, his eyes half closed. Knew from long experience that he was absorbing every syllable, weighing each phrase against the immense store of knowledge within his mind.
After some time, I became aware that we had turned off the main road onto a narrow lane. At length, the carriage drew up before a large, solitary house. It was built in an old-fashioned style, with high gables, and the windows were dark, save for a single glimmer.
And you entered?
Indeed, Colonel Stark ushered me into a dimly lit hall. There I met a second person, a small, quiet man with fair hair and a timid manner. He was introduced as Mr. Ferguson, the Colonel's secretary and manager.
A large, domineering leader, attended by a smaller, deferential subordinate. An interesting contrast. Pray continue.
They led me down a corridor and into a chamber where stood the machine, a hydraulic press of great C. I examined it by lamplight and quickly saw the source of its defect, a leak in the chamber which wreck. I'd repair. I assured them I could mend it, though I would require proper tools.
And were these supplied?
Conan Stark insisted the work must be done immediately. He pressed me to begin without delay. Yet even as I examined the apparatus, I felt a curious sensation that all was not as it seemed.
Excellent, Mr. Hatherley. You possess an instinct for danger. Describe what followed.
The young engineer paused, his hand trembling slightly upon the arm of the chair. Holmes leaned forward, his eyes bright, and for a moment the firelight gleamed upon his hawk-like profile.
I had scarcely begun to examine the piston when the door opened softly and a woman entered. She was young, dark-haired, with an anxious expression. She looked at me earnestly, and in a low voice she whispered, "Do not trust them. Leave at once, while you can."
A warning, and what did you do?
I was so taken aback I could scarce reply. Colonel Stark instantly followed her, his face dark with anger. He spoke to her in German harshly, then forced her from the room. He turned back to me with a strange smile, saying she was his niece of excitable temperament, and I must pay her no heed.
And you believed him? Bjorkja!
Against my better judgment, yes. The promise of 50 guineas was strong, and the work seemed harmless enough.
At this point, the poor fellow's strength gave way. He covered his face with his uninjured hand as though to shut out the horror of what he next must tell. Holmes, however, spoke gently, with that rare sympathy which in moments of genuine suffering he could display.
Courage, Mr. Hatherley. You are among friends. Proceed at your own pace.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. What happened thereafter?
Here the narrative must pause, for the events which followed were stranger and more perilous than any I had yet heard, but I shall reserve them for the continuation of this tale. I had paused my pen at that moment in the retelling, for Mr. Victor Hatherley, our unfortunate visitor, had faltered in his account. The young engineer sat before our fire, pale from loss of blood and shaken with the memory of what he had endured. Holmes, with characteristic patience, urged him gently onward, while I busied myself with tightening the fresh bandages about his hand.
You have spoken with candor thus far, Mr. Hatherley. Do not fear to continue. Each detail you provide brings us closer to truth.
Very well, Mr. Holmes. I shall relate the remainder, though it chills me still. As I said, I had been warned by the young lady to flee. Her words lingered in my mind, yet I forced myself to believe Colonel Stark's assurance that she was excitable and fanciful.
A natural error, sir. The prospect of gain, combined with their plausible explanation, could sway many.
I applied myself to the hydraulic press. It was a formidable device, with a chamber and piston capable of exerting enormous pressure. While I inspected it, Colonel Stark remained close, watching me with eyes that seemed to burn to my very skin. The secretary, Ferguson, flitted nervously about, fetching tools at the colonel's command.
And the defect, was it genuine?
At first it seemed so, a leakage in the iron chamber, as though a flaw had been caused by strain. Yet, upon closer inspection, I perceived something amiss. The press bore marks not of ordinary industrial use, but of some hidden purpose. The stains upon the chamber were not of oil or water, they were of a dark reddish hue.
Blood.
I cannot say with certainty, yet it had that look. And I thought again of the woman's warning.
Here the young man shuddered, and I confess that even I felt a thrill of dread at his words. Holmes, however, merely inclined his head, as if some private conjecture of his own were gaining strength.
I turned to Colonel Stark and said that to repair the press properly would require careful fitting new materials. He grew impatient, urging me to work with what lay at hand, but I insisted it was impossible. At last, with a muttered oath, he led me from the room, saying he would show me the chamber in which the defect could be seen more clearly.
You followed him?
Regretfully, yes. He conducted me along a narrow passage, descending a flight of stone steps into the cellar. The air grew colder, the lamps fewer. At last we entered a low vaulted room. There stood the press once more, but now I perceived it in its entirety, a monstrous contrivance of iron, with beams and screws fit to crush the hardest substance.
And it was in this chamber
That the truth came upon me suddenly. The chamber was not built for industry. It was built for destruction. The stains were indeed of blood. No other liquid could leave such marks upon iron. The whole contrivance was a devil's instrument, though for what purpose I could scarcely guess.
stirs. Hatherley's voice sank, and his eyes widened with the memory of that fearful discovery. I leaned forward, unable to restrain my horror. Holmes, however, remained as calm as though he listened to a scientific lecture.
It was then the woman appeared once more. She rushed into the chamber, her face pale with terror, and seized me by the arm. "Flee!" she cried. "They mean to kill you. You are in deadly peril."
A brave creature to risk herself thus.
I scarce had time to comprehend her words when Colonel Stark stood in after her, his eyes blazing. He caught her by the wrist and flung her aside. Then, turning upon me, he shouted that I had seen too much, that no stranger might leave with knowledge of their secret.
And what then?
Before I could defend myself, he seized me with surprising strength and thrust me into the very chamber of the press. Ferguson, the timid secretary, hurried forward at his command, and together they forced me beneath the descending plate.
Monstrous! You mean they intended to crush you alive?
Precisely so. They slammed the door of iron, and I was imprisoned within. The great metal plate poised above my head. The colonel's hand went to the lever that controlled the descent.
Jazz. Here the young man's voice grew thick, his whole frame trembling at the recollection.
I shouted for mercy, but they only laughed, a dreadful sound echoing in the vault. The woman screamed, begging them to desist. Then the lever moved. Slowly, inexorably, the plate began to descend.
My dear fellow, the horror, the horror!
Inch by inch, it came down. I could scarce breathe, for the iron pressed upon me. I struggled, but the chamber was closed, my limbs pinned. It seemed but a matter of moments ere I should be flattened, like a fly beneath a stone.
At this point, even Holmes's mask of composure shifted. His brows knit, and his eyes gleamed with cold fury.
Yet you survived, Mr. Hatherley. By what means did you escape that devilish contrivance?
The woman, God bless her, threw herself upon the colonel, dragging at his arm. In the struggle, the lever was thrust back, and the plate ceased to descend. With desperate strength, I forced the chamber door and flung myself out, bruised and gasping.
A providential intervention indeed.
But my peril was not ended. Colonel Stark, enraged, seized the cleaver from a nearby bench. He swung at me with murderous force. I raised my hand to shield my head, and the blade fell upon it, severing my thumb.
The young man raised his bandaged hand. Who would row? And I could scarce suppress a shudder at the thought of that dreadful blow.
In my agony, I stumbled to the stair. The woman again guided me, whispering the way. I heard the colonel shouting behind, and the timid Ferguson urging haste. Somehow I gained the outer door, dashed through the garden and into the night.
And then,
I ran, half mad with terror and pain, across fields and hedgerows. At last I saw the lamps of a railway station. I staggered onto the platform just as the train stood ready to depart. The guard, seeing my condition, helped me into a carriage. Thus I reached London this morning.
His tale concluded, Victor Hatherley sank back in the chair, utterly exhausted. Holmes rose and paced the room in silence, his hands behind his back, his head bowed in thought. The villains, Holmes, too, lure an innocent man with the promise of honest labor only to attempt his destruction. We must inform the police without delay.
indeed, Watson, but not without precision. A rash move may warn the culprits and leave them at large. No, we must proceed methodically.
You believe you can trace them, Mr. Holmes?
Place them? Why, it is simplicity itself. You have furnished me with every clue. The journey of 1 hour from your lodgings places the house within a defined radius near Reading. The German accent, the pretended military title, the hydraulic press used for unlawful purpose, these narrow the field further.
Hmm? And the woman? Hum.
Ah, she is a figure of interest. Her conduct suggests reluctance in the crime. She may prove our ally.
Holmes halted abruptly before the fire, a tie, his eyes shining with that peculiar light I had often seen when his mind grasped the heart of a mystery.
Watson, prepare yourself. We go down to Reading by the next train. Mr. Jane, Hatherley, you shall accompany us if your strength permits.
Though I am weak, Mr. Holmes, I will not shrink from it.
Excellent. Then we shall visit Colonel Lysander Stark at his own den of villainy. I would wager the game is not yet played out.
Exit. With that, the course of our adventure was set. Yet little did I foresee how strange and perilous would be the events awaiting us at that lonely house. Scarcely had Victor Hatherley concluded his dreadful tale when Holmes set our course with his accust, or met decisiveness. I marveled, as often before, at the cool clarity with which he seized upon the essentials of a case and formed an immediate plan of action. While most men would have been paralyzed by the horror of the young engineer's narrative, Holmes was already 3 steps ahead, shaping the hunt that must follow.
Watson, the matter is pressing. The villains will not idle after this morning's escape. They may already be making preparations to vanish. We must not afford them the chance.
Right, Holmes. The police should be warned without delay.
So they shall be. Yet the police, admirable though they are in uniformed precision, often lack the subtlety required for such pursuits. Let us secure the first advantage by personal reconnaissance.
You mean you will come with me to Reading?
Precisely so, Mr. Hatherley. And you, Watson, will accompany us as ever. A stout heart and a good revolver may serve us better than any warrant.
You may rely upon both, Holmes. Thus resolved, we lost no time. Holmes hailed a cab, and the 3 of us were soon rattling over the cobbles toward Paddington Station. Parmenton, Station. Poor Hatherley, pale and weary, bore himself with admirable courage despite his mutilated hand. Holmes, seated opposite, maintained a thoughtful silence, his keen eyes fixed upon the passing streets as though each lamppost and shop sign offered some hidden clue. You are turning something over in your mind, Holmes.
Ha ha, indeed, Watson. Consider the elements. A solitary house near Reading, occupied by 2 men of foreign extraction, one of them violent, the other timid, an immense hydraulic press concealed as though it were a guilty secret, a young woman held in their power, yet striving to save a stranger. Put these together, and what picture emerges?
Some unlawful enterprise, clearly, yet I cannot guess its precise nature.
Precisely. And therein lies the fascination.
At Paddington, we took our seats in a third-class carriage. The train thundered westward through the gathering dusk, the rhythm of the wheels beating time to our thoughts. Hatherley leaned back, eyes closed from exhaustion, while Holmes sat bolt upright, his long fingers drumming lightly upon his knee. Holmes, you appear restless. Do you already perceive the solution?
The solution lies before us, Watson. It only remains to verify it. I will not commit myself yet, but I have my suspicions.
The lamps flickered into life as we sped across the darkening fields. At last, the train drew into Reading, and we alighted. Holmes wasted no time in securing a trap from the station yard, and we set forth along a country road, the horses' hoofs striking sparks in the night.
The house cannot be far from here. I recall the road turned sharply by a grove of trees.
Good. Direct us as best you can. Each remembered feature may guide us.
The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and autumn leaves. The road stretched ahead, lonely and dimly lit by the stars. Presently, Hatherley, peering into the darkness, cried out,
There, that must be the grove I spoke of. Beyond it, we turned to the right.
Holmes rapped the roof of the trap, and the driver steered accordingly, turned from the main road into a narrow lane, rutted and overgrown. Soon a darker shape loomed ahead, a house, large and somber, with high gables outlined against the starlit sky. That must be it. We descended from the trap and approached cautiously. Holmes held up his hand for silence. No light shone from the windows, and the whole place lay in shadow. Tupper in furnace, we perceived that something was amiss.
Do you smell it, Watson?
Smoke, strong and acrid.
Precisely. The house has been set aflame.
We hastened forward. We hastened forward. Flames licked from the windows of the lower story, while smoke billowed from the roof. The roar of fire filled the night, yet strangely, no cry came from within. No figure stirred about the grounds. The place is deserted.
Abandoned in haste, no doubt. Our birds have flown.
The villains, they have destroyed the evidence of their crime.
Fire burned fiercely, feeding upon the old timber. Sparks rose into the night sky, casting a lurid glow upon the surrounding fields. To the Bemene watched in gringly out and draw as the structure crackled and groaned. Presently, a group of country folk arrived, roused by the blaze, and set to with buckets from a nearby pond. Yet it was plain the house could not be saved. A grim sight, Holmes. Do you think the woman escaped?
That, Watson, is the question. If she remained within, then she is lost. Yet I fancy she had more wit than to perish with her gaolers.
Yumoy, we lingered until the roof fell in with a mighty crash, sending a pillar of sparks heavenward. Holmes stood silent, his face illuminated by the glow, his eyes fixed intently upon the spectacle as though reading in the flames some secret message. The police will have to be summoned, Holmes.
Undoubtedly. Yet they will find nothing but ashes. The villains have vanished, and their machine with them. Only the memory of their crime remains, carried in the mutilated hand of our companion. Aye!
I have lost my thumb, but perhaps I have saved my life. That woman, it is she I think of. Without her, I should now lie crushed beneath that accursed press.
A gallant creature, without doubt, and yet, what her true relation to the men may have been, we may never know.
By now, a constable had arrived, summoned by the commotion. Holmes spoke briefly with him, recounting in measured terms the outline of Hatherley's adventure. The man listened with wide eyes, clearly half doubting so wild a tale.
A German colonel, a great press for Crussian, and a lady warning you away? Lord, sir, it sounds more like a penny novelette than sober fact.
Facts, my good fellow, are often stranger than fiction. Take my card. If your inspector desires further particulars, let him call upon me at Baker Street.
With that, Holmes turned upon his heel and we quitted the scene, leaving the villagers to battle the flames as best they might. Well, Holmes, what say you now? House is gone, the villains fled, and the case seems ended in smoke.
Ended? Nay, Watson, though the criminals may have escaped for now, we have learned much. Permit me to enlighten you.
Holmes settled himself in the trap as we rattled back toward reading. The night wind whipped at his cloak, but his voice rang clear in the darkness.
The key lies in the press itself. Ask yourself, what legitimate purpose could such a machine serve, hidden in a country house, guarded with secrecy and violence? None. But for forging counterfeit coins, it is perfect.
Ray, of course, the secrecy, the stains, the insistence upon silence.
Oh, precisely. The press was employed to stamp false coinage. The dark stains upon the chamber were quicksilver, and acids used in the process, mistaken by our young friend for blood.
Then my suspicion was in error?
Not error, Mr. Hatherley, merely misinterpretation. Your instinct that all was not as it seemed was entirely correct. You stumbled upon a band of forgers who sought to silence you lest their scheme be betrayed.
Holmes's reasoning, as always, shed sudden light upon the shadows. I could not but admire the swift precision with which he pieced together the puzzle. Yet the poor woman, what part did she play in this?
Cure. A prisoner, most likely, or a relative held in unwilling complicity. Her courage in warning Hatherley speaks for her nobility of spirit. I fear we may never know her fate.
Silence fell between us as we pondered the matter. At last the train bore us back to London, weary and subdued. Holmes alone seemed unmoved, as though the night's adventure were but another entry in his endless catalogue of human crime. Our return to London was marked by silence more than conversation. Poor Victor Hatherley, exhausted in body and spirit, slumbered fitfully in the corner of the carriage, his wounded hand bandaged and resting upon his knee. Holmes, opposite me, sat erect and alert, his keen features unmoved by fatigue, his gaze lost in that peculiar inward concentration which I had learned to recognize as the prelude to explanation. Holmes, you have spoken of forgery. Might you not expand upon your reasoning? To my mind, though your suggestion is most plausible, the evidence remains but circumstantial.
Thus, circumstantial perhaps, but not insufficient. Allow me, Watson, to marshal the facts in their proper order.
At this, Holmes leaned forward, his long fingers interlaced, his eyes glittering in the dim lamplight of the carriage.
First, the location. A solitary house, isolated from neighbors, yet within reach of a railway line. Such seclusion is ideal for an unlawful enterprise. Second, the apparatus, a hydraulic press of size and power far beyond any legitimate domestic or agricultural purpose. Third, the conduct of its possessors, secrecy, violence, and a readiness to destroy their own dwelling rather than risk discovery. So, put together, the influence is plain.
Forgery, then, the manufacture of false coin.
Precisely. The press was used to stamp counterfeit pieces, likely gold or silver. The stains which Hatherley mistook for blood were in truth from the quicksilver and acids employed in the process. That poor fellow's error is understandable. He is an engineer, not a chemist.
And the unfortunate woman?
For antiguous sio zom sancio was has bom sambigo with just maljus be. Yet from her words and actions I deduce she was not a willing accomplice. Most likely she was coerced by the men, perhaps a relative, perhaps a servant, ensnared by circumstances. Her intervention saved Hatherley's life at the risk of her own.
A noble soul, indeed. And the villains?
They have fled, Watson. The fire was their own doing, a ruthless act to obliterate evidence. With luck, the police may trace them, but I doubt it. Foreign adventurers are slippery quarry, and the continent affords many hiding places.
Good. By the time Holmes had concluded his explanation, the train had reached Paddington. We conveyed Hatherley safely to his lodgings, where I promised to attend him daily until his recovery. Holmes, with rare courtesy, clasped the young man's hand in farewell.
You have been most unfortunate, Mr. Hatherley, but you may count yourself fortunate in this. You retain your life, though you have lost a thumb. Many a man has fared worse at the hands of criminals less desperate than these.
Your words are kind, sir. I thank you both for your aid.
With that, we left him to his rest and returned at last to Baker Street, the familiar sight of our sitting room, with its litter of newspapers, chemical apparatus, and tobacco ash, greeted us like the heart of home after a stormy voyage. Holmes threw himself into his armchair, stretched his long legs before the fire, and clasped his hands behind his head with a sigh of content. You appear well satisfied, Holmes, though the villains have escaped.
Satisfaction, Watson, lies not in the apprehension of every rogue, but in the unravelling of each enigma. The world is full of knaves. To catch them all would be a Herculean labour. My task is but to expose their methods and trace their design.
Still, I cannot but feel the law has been cheated.
Perhaps, yet the law is but one instrument of justice. In this case, punishment may come in another form. Such men as Stark and Ferguson live by deceit and treachery. They cannot long escape retribution.
Holmes's calm assurance often amazed me, where I, with my soldier's sense of duty, longed to see the miscreants clapped in irons. He seemed content with intellectual victory alone. I must ask, Holmes, how soon in Hatherley's tale did you divine the truth?
Almost from the outset. The secrecy, the promise of large payment for trivial labour, the foreign adventurer in an English country house. These were hints enough. When he described the press, the matter was settled in my mind.
Yet you refrained from revealing your conclusion until all was told.
Naturally, premature explanation may bias the witness's account. Better to let the narrative flow unimpeded and then to interpret it. That is the method, Watson. Patience in listening, precision in reasoning.
Could not but smile at his words, for I knew well how often he rebuked my own impatience. Many a time had I interrupted with questions only to be silenced by his raised finger. Still, I resolve anew to school myself in the habits of careful observation. There is one matter that troubles me still. If the press was used for coinage, why did the colonel feign that it required repair?
An astute question, Watson. I surmise that the press had indeed developed a flaw, endangering their operation. Yet in summoning Hatherley, they miscalculated. They thought him but an obscure engineer who could be silenced after rendering service. His courage and her compassion upset their scheme.
Holmes relapsed into silence, his eyes fixed upon the dancing flames, fetched my journal and made notes of the evening's adventure, determined to set it down faithfully while memory remained fresh. Presently Holmes spoke again, most softly, as if musing to himself.
It is curious, Watson, how the smallest incidents may open windows upon vast designs. A severed thumb, a whisper of warning, a midnight journey, and lo, we glimpse a conspiracy stretching across borders. The world is woven of such threads, visible only to the patient eye.
His words lingered in my mind long after I had retired. I reflected how often I had seen him draw vast conclusions from the merest trifles, a footprint upon a stair, a stain upon a sleeve, the faintest inflection in a voice. To Holmes, indeed, everything was elementary. The following days brought further reports from Reading. The police, investigating the ruins, found fragments of metal dies and traces of melted silver. Tharios. No bodies were discovered, suggesting that Stark and his accomplices had fled ere the flames consumed their lair. The woman was not seen again. Whether she had escaped or perished, none could say. The melancholy ending, Holmes. The poor lady deserved better.
True, Watson. Yet the world is not just in its allotments. All we may do is record her courage and hope that fate granted her some measure of deliverance.
Thus the matter closed, so far as public record was concerned. Yet to me, the memory lingered vividly. I saw again the pained face of Victor Hatherley, the bandaged hand, the lurid glow of the burning house, and above all, I heard once more Holmes's calm voice, sifting the strange from the trivial, turning chaos into clarity. Several days passed in quiet routine at Baker Street after our return from Reading. The case of the engineer's thumb, as I dubbed it in my notes, remained much upon my mind. My medical visits to Victor Hatherley confirmed that he was recovering well in body, though the loss of his thumb was, of course, irreparable. His spirit, I was glad to see, did not flag.
I must learn to live without it, Dr. Watson. Way or given best. It is but a thumb, after all, and I might easily have lost my life instead.
True enough, Mr. Hatherley. You may thank your courage and the compassion of that unknown lady for your preservation.
I shall never forget her, nor the terror of that press. It haunts my sleep even now.
His words stirred in me a profound pity. To be so young, with skill and ambition, and to bear for life the mark of one night's misadventure, I resolved to record the affair with the fidelity due to his courage, and the justice owed to that brave woman who had risked all in his defense. Tapping back at Baker Street, Holmes seemed little affected by the episode. He busied himself with monographs, correspondence, and those curious experiments which littered our sitting room with retorts and test tubes. Yet I knew him too well not to perceive that beneath his calm lay deep thought. Holmes, you treat this matter as though it were already consigned to the past. Yet surely you feel some indignation that the culprits remain at large?
Indignation, Watson, is a luxury I cannot afford. The criminal classes are too numerous. If I allowed myself to rage at each one who slipped the net, I should waste energy better employed in pursuit of the next case.
Yet justice.
Justice, my dear fellow, is not always the province of the detective. My business is detection, not prosecution. Still, I admit this Colonel Stark piques me. He is a bold villain, resourceful and unscrupulous. I should like to measure wits with him again.
Holmes smiled faintly as he spoke, and I thought how strange a man he was, able to regard even deadly adversaries as subjects for intellectual curiosity. A week later, Inspector Bradstreet of Scotland Yard called upon us, and this and that, out dizzes, his ruddy face beaming despite the seriousness of his errand.
We've been down to the ruins near Reading, Mr. Holmes. Found fragments of dies and crucibles, just as you suggested. Plain enough it was a forger's den. But as for the rogues themselves, not a sign. They've slipped clean away.
As I expected, Inspector. Still, you have confirmation of my theory, and that is something.
You hit the nail square, sir. If only we'd had the word a day earlier, we might have nabbed him. As it is, the game's gone cold.
There will be other games, Inspector. The breed is not extinct.
With that philosophical remark, Holmes dismissed the matter, much to the inspector's bemusement. I, however, continued to ponder it deeply. One evening, as we sat by the fire, I ventured a question that had long troubled me. Holmes, I confess I am puzzled. You speak often of deduction, yet in this case, how did you pass from mere fragments of narrative to certainty of forgery?
Ah, Watson, you touch upon the very essence of my method. Let me illustrate. The secrecy of the enterprise suggested illegality. The machinery, a hydraulic press of unusual power, was unlikely for any purpose save stamping or molding. Now, stamping what? Not documents, too small, not wood or leather, unsuited, but coinage. Ah, there we touch the mark. Add the foreign adventurers, the isolated house, the chemicals mistaken for blood. The conclusion was inevitable.
When you lay it out so plainly, it seems simple indeed.
Everything is simple, Watson, when explained. That is the art of reasoning backward, from result to cause. Most men stumble because they begin at the wrong end.
I considered his words long after, recognizing anew how far my own faculties fell short of his. Yet it was always his way to encourage rather than belittle.
You learn quickly, Watson. You observe more keenly now than when first we shared these rooms. In time, you will make your own deductions.
I thank you, Holmes. If I improve at all, it is through your example. Our conversation was interrupted by the rattle of hansom wheels in the street below, and Holmes turned his attention to fresh correspondence. Yet for me, the lesson lingered. And so ended the adventure of the engineer's thumb. Victor Hatherley recovered his health, though never again could he ply his trade with full dexterity. He lived, however, to become a respected consultant in his field, his maimed hand serving as a silent testament to the perils of misplaced trust. Colonel Lysander Stark and his confederates, no word ever reached us, whether they perished in their own flames or found refuge on the continent, I cannot say. As for the woman whose courage saved a stranger's life, she vanished into mystery, her fate unrecorded by history. Yet in my heart, I keep her memory, a symbol of humanity shining amid villainy. For myself, I learned once more the measure of Sherlock Holmes's genius, his power to pierce the veil of appearances, to discern the truth where others saw only confusion. Beside him, I felt humble, yet proud too, that I might share in his adventures, recording for posterity the triumphs of his singular mind. And thus, reader, I close the tale with a renewed conviction that the friendship of Holmes has been the most extraordinary fortune of my life.